Welcome, everybody. Okay, let's get the show on the road. Greg, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, excellent. Let's get it going. Good morning, everybody. And let me just put my camera on here. Great. Morning, everybody, and welcome to the session. I'm Gabriel, Management Executive at First Digital, and we are very excited to host today's session and give you this very practical overview of Microsoft Power BI using some real scenarios. This session is very much an introduction, but carries an important message about how we believe data projects inside First Digital should be started quickly and with low risk for our clients. Before we start, just a little bit of housekeeping. Today's session will be recorded, and the recording will be made available on our Tech Summit website. Details will be emailed to you guys after the event, so feel free to refer a colleague who might have missed today's session to that recording. Due to the size of the audience, everybody is muted by default, and we ask that you post any questions that you might have during the session to the chat window. I think we're all familiar with Teams by now, but for those that don't know, in order to access the chat window, click on the speech bubble at the top right-hand corner of your Teams window. All questions that are asked will be discussed by our speakers towards the end of the session. It's unlikely that we'll get to all the questions or be able to answer all your questions, but our contact details will be shared after the event in case you want to get in touch with us around some of your questions. Today's webinar is not a training session. It's a practical overview of how you can empower yourself to gain insights from data quickly, and in this case, using Power BI. And importantly, how you can form a foundation for potentially a larger data analytics project. The session will be hosted by Greg Wasp, who's our business manager for our data team, and Shane Muthu, who's a lead solutions architect in that data team. Also in the background is Stephanie Brainard, our marketing coordinator. She's operating the cogs of the webinar. So if you've got any issues during the session, please contact her using the team chat function and she'll try and assist you. First Digital builds out many value-added services across various technology verticals. So very briefly, the business consists of 5 pillars, of which custom development, cloud and serverless-based development, DevOps principles and methodologies, and containerization is one of our core pillars. We also focus on process automation, and we are the largest certified partner globally for K2 and Nintex, and have various South African clients that we've done automation projects for in that space. We also deploy content management systems and deploy Microsoft's low-code answer to our clients, which is in the form of Power Platform. We've got a data analytics, machine learning, and AI team, of which Greg and Shane is representing that team today. And lastly, we've got a platform advisory services team, which helps clients with their migration journeys to the cloud. Before we start the session, we'd like to do a quick poll, kind of to break the ice. You will see that pop up in your Teams client now. And if you can select one of the options that's presented to you, we can discuss the outcome of that in the question and answer section. So the question that we're posting to you: what current tools are you using for analyzing and reporting data? So you'll see that in front of you now. If that didn't pop up and you go to the chat window, you'll see the poll in there and you can submit your answer from there. Great. Thanks for that. So we've got a good spread of skill today. Obviously, Excel is still a great tool of choice for the business to analyze and look at their data. So Microsoft made their grand entrance years ago by doing what they typically do best, which is to commoditize otherwise complicated technology platforms. And Power BI is no exception. Yes, it's a tool in a suite of tools, but most importantly, it allowed users that understand their own data to analyze it beyond what Excel offers out the box. The road to data insights is scattered with data project skeletons. And in this session, Greg and Shane will show you how this tool can be used to avoid the typical pitfalls of complicated and expensive data projects. So without further delay, Greg and Shane, over to you guys.
Hi guys, welcome to the session. I hope it's actually going to be informative. This is just the tip of the iceberg for us from a data analytics perspective, but it's one of the, in my experience, has been one of the biggest hurdles for companies or organizations or individuals to actually get involved in data projects, is because it is usually massively expensive. It takes time, and actually usually that by the end of the project, the outcomes or the insights it's actually gained is actually no longer relevant. So your time to value is way too long. So what we want to actually do from our methodology is actually turn it, if you want to call it, turn the entire thing on its head. I mean, Shane, if you can maybe just run from a technical point of view, you've been deployed on many data projects. What are your 3 biggest pain points from an IT perspective when a big data project starts?
Thanks, Greg. Well, firstly, it has to do with the constant information, between IT and business users. Usually technical jargon gets mixed up between that. Often the info is misinterpreted, and really the data structures, where it's coming from, unstructured, etc. And really what we want to do here at FD is allow the business user to provide us with the data model, so we can be able to build that from them.
So yeah, as I said, old process, it's IT driven, it is clunky, there's massive governance, etc. around it, and it's also a misunderstanding. Most people don't actually even understand data. So what we're going to do here in the in this demo, we actually do a live demo. We did record it purely just because, as everyone knows, things break when we're doing presentations. But in real time, Shane took 15 minutes to develop this dashboard and publish it into an enterprise platform, so other users can actually reuse that model or gain access to that model and interact with that data. So without any further points to this, let's just jump straight into what we're going to do. So for a case study, we took it. There's a business user. He's got a business question. He wants to know which products are moving, where they're moving, which products does he need to invest in more. And we can use multiple, obviously there's multiple use cases. This was just a sample data set we pulled together. So the 3 main questions we're going to ask is, in which month and year had the most profit? Where is the company seeing the most success by geographic location? And which product is actually showing the best performance and therefore should be invested in more going forward? Just a couple of things. The first step that we're going to go through is obviously finding, loading, and displaying data. And let's just talk about a couple of things here, because one of the biggest things we've found as well is a lack of data literacy in a large number of organizations, which actually creates fear from a business user to even get involved or ask for data. So hence, most people just end up just using Excel to do as best they can. The problem with that is the fact that is very siloed and it's not curated, and we can also not share that in an enterprise way. Shane, let's just run through a couple of the, like, if you want to call it, technical jargon, so that we just don't scare people off. What are the main things we're talking about here?
No problem, Greg. So in the demo, we'll talk about SQL. SQL is structured query language, just a language we use to query our relational database. We talk about DAX. DAX is data analytics expressions, which is basically Excel formulas on steroids, whereas Excel points to cells, DAX points to rows and tables. Sharepoint folders, once we upload to Teams, it goes to Sharepoint folders. We're going to be previewing that in the demo because that's the most common place users keep their Excel files as well as their local. And that's about as much technical jargon as this demo is going to have, Greg.
Okay, great. Let's jump straight into it.
Hello everyone, my name is Shane Madhu and I'm a data and analytics consultant at First Tech Digital. I'm very humbled and excited to be part of this great initiative where we make data citizens the custodians of their data. This is a part 1 of 3 series, and in the first part we're going to ingest data from 3 different sources using Power BI, perform some slide transformations as well as filtrations, create a simple DAX table, and create the relationship. With that, let's cross over to Power BI. So the first thing you need to do is go to your Home tab, get data, depending on what type of file it is, CSV. In this case, in my case, it's an Excel workbook. So I'm going to choose the file, I'm going to click open, and it's going to allow me to preview it and make any transformations before loading the data. So for the purposes of this, I'm not going to do any transformations now. I'm just going to load it straight in. As you can see, it's loading the sheet. We have the data. Excellent. Now, the second place a normal user generally has the data is uploaded into Teams. Okay, so all you need to do is click on the file that you want to import into Power BI, open in desktop, and once the file is open, you go to File, Info, and you copy the path of the file. Once you copy the path, you go back to Power BI, and get data, but this time we're going to choose the web option. Okay, we're just going to paste that URL, and the only thing we need to do there is remove the question mark to the 1. Okay, that's it. Once we move that, we press OK. Connects to your SharePoint, and there you can see our sheet 1 is available. So again, I'm not going to do any transformations. I'm just going to load the data. And as you can see, the data is loaded. Finally, I'm going to show you using, for the intermediate users, SQL Server. So obviously I'm going to be using my local machine, and just going to put the name of my database, and I'm going to use the import method. Okay, it's going to show me a list of tables within that database, and I'm just going to click on the one I want. And in this step, I'm going to show you a few transformations. So let's click Transform Data. It opens up in Power Query Editor. Now, let's say, for example, we want to see our countries, capital letters. We click on the column, we right click it, transform, uppercase. As you can see, it does give you a lot of other options, but for the sake of this demo, we're just going to make it uppercase. We know that the Montana product is no longer listed, so we want to remove it from this data set. So we'll be applying a filtering step. Now the data set is removed for all Montana products. So we see that the profit is in decimal, while sales is an integer, so we want to change that. We just have to click on the column, transform, look at the data type, which says decimal number, click on the drop down and make that a whole number. Fantastic. Once we've made all our transformations, we click home, close and apply. As you can see, it has now brought in the financial summary. Okay, so I'm going to now delete these 2 from the model, as we do not need them. It's as simple as right click and delete. Excellent. Now I have a table view of my financial data. Fantastic. What I want to do now is create a quick date dimension. Okay, to do that, I'm just going to quickly give it a name, date, and I'm going to use the calendar function. Okay, you can see the IntelliSense has already picked it up, and it actually tells you the parameters that you have to pass, which is the start date and the end date. So we're going to put in date, and then we're going to put in the year, which is 2/13, comma 01, comma 01, close parentheses, and then comma date. And again, this is the end year, so 2014, comma 12, comma 31, close parentheses, close parentheses. Okay. We should get a column giving us the dates between those range. Fantastic. Now, let's make a relation between this and our financial summary report table. As you can see in our model, they are there, but there is no relationship. To create a relationship, it is as simple as clicking onto the column and dragging over to the column that's going to be the joining key. There you go. As you can see, the relationship has been created. This is the end of part 1. I hope you've enjoyed it and found it informative. I will see you again in part 2.
So from that, we can see that you can actually, as a business user, in very simple terms, and not getting very, very involved, or not having to have lots of SQL skills or Oracle skills or whatever database source systems you're using. You could request data from IT to load it into a SharePoint list, for example, or a SharePoint folder, or just have an extract and a CSV file and very easily start actually working with your data. Obviously, in future webinars, we will go into a lot more detail around data governance and data curation, as well as data ingestion. But just from that, immediately we now have a business user that has got the data he needs, which they now own, in order to start creating insights from it. So in the next step, we've got the 3 questions. Which month and year had the most profit? And we're going to display that in a linear graph. Where is the company seeing the most success by country, by geographical region, and linking that through to Azure Maps to be able to get that data. And then which product and segment should the company continue to invest in? And that's going to be displayed with a bar graph. So without further ado, here's Shane showing how to create the visuals.
Welcome back, everybody, to part 2. In part 2, we're going to be adding a title, create some visuals to answer our test case questions, add a date slicer. I'm going to show you some drill down functionality, as well as changing the theme. So where we left off in part 1, we imported our financial summary table and we created our date dimension using simple DAX, and we created the relationship between the two. Now we're simply going to insert a text box, format that correctly, and we're going to give it a name. Let's call it financial summary. Let's make the text a little bigger. Let's centralize it. Fantastic. Yeah. Excellent. So now that we have our header, we can go on to our very first case question, which is which month and year had the most profit. So to do that, we're just going to click on the bar chart. We need to look at our profit as values, and then we need to look at our date for our values. Now we don't want to use a date hierarchy, we just want to use the date, and then we can convert this chart into a linear chart. Just format that correctly. Yeah. State. Fantastic. Now, to make cosmetic changes to this, you would have to click on your Format tab. For example, if you want your title to be called something different, let's say monthly profits, for example. You might want your header to be centralized. It's very, very user-friendly to be able to make these types of cosmetic changes. So that would answer our first test case, of which month and year had the most profit. Quite clear. We're going to use the map function for our next question, which was the most successful company by country. In order to do that, we would have to look at each country, put the country under location, and match that up with the sales associated with each country. So now we can decide if the bubble is indicative of the amount of sales made within that country. Excellent. Now we move on to the third question. Which product and segment should the company continue to invest in? So let's get our visual on the board. That's formatted correctly. For this visual, we're going to bring the product in the axis. We're going to use the segment as the legend, and we're going to bring the sales to the values. And that'll clearly give us the best-selling product per segment. So it tells us where we should focus on. So the base here being best product, and the segment government and small businesses where they should invest in. So as you can see, you can get very, very quick insights using Power BI. I'm just going to quickly make that header a bit smaller and add a date slicer. First, I'm just going to drag that over here. Yeah. And I'm going to bring the date field across. Fantastic. So make this a little bigger. We can see our, there we go. And if we move that, it should change our data accordingly. There you go. Excellent. Finally, I want to show you how easy it is to add drill down functionality to this report. So after using it for a while, you may want to find the best product for that specific month and year. So in case of that, you'd simply click on the chart, take the product and drop it underneath the axis. Okay, so now you can see it's giving you a few more options. All you need to do is click down on the drill down function, total functionality, and click on the data point, and now you can see the products for that particular month, the best products for that month. And it's as easy as that. Lastly, I'm going to change the view. I personally like dark theme. I think it has a much more sleeker look. And that is the end of part 2. Thank you very much for joining me.
So finally, okay, so we've gone through our data, we've created a visualization, you figured out that this could actually be something that are of interest within the organization. The next part, what we're going to talk about is how we actually start sharing and collaborating on that data insight that a business user has done. So effectively, what we're talking about here is turning a data project into a data task. Once we've now actually got the dashboard, we know what insights we're looking for. Instead of going back to the beginning of the problem statement of having to have gone through a data project to get to this point, we can now use this to publish it as is so that other business users can consume the data. We can even embed that at a later stage. We'll discuss embedding that within Teams or SharePoint or in web apps so that people outside your organization might need to be able to view that data. But as well, if this is something that becomes significant for you at a later stage, to give that to IT, to turn into a true data project or enrich it further or add on more data. So without saying any more, let's go into how we share and publish.
Welcome back, everyone, to part 3 and the final part of this series. We will be covering how to save your dashboard, publish it to a workspace, share your dashboard with other users, as well as turning your data model into enterprise data. So let's cross over back to Power BI and pick up where we left off in part 2. So we are now going to save our files. So you come here, just click save, save your file for you. Now you go to the home tab and you want to publish it. So let's click publish. Okay, and it gives you obviously different options. I'm going to just click into my workspace, select, and I'm just going to give that a few seconds for that to publish. Excellent. Now that will publish to your workspace. Okay, so from there you need to go to your workspace, and there you will see the webinar file uploaded. Okay, now let's just open the file and have a look, see what it looks like. This is what it's going to look like from your workspace, and put your date photos, and they're working as they should. So let's just take a step back, go back to the workspaces, go back to my workspace, and let's share this file. Okay, we want to share this report with somebody. So I know that James would find a lot of value in this. I'm going to click on James, and I'm going to click send. Now James is going to have a link to this for him to be able to access it. Okay, now we've shared our dashboard with other users. How can we turn this into enterprise data? Well, we would ask IT we would share our Power BI model with them. We'll ask them to recreate the model within the database. Once this model is recreated in the database, you will change your data source from pointing to either file to the database. Now, whenever the database is updated, so will your report. So you'll no longer be reporting off an Excel sheet that you constantly have to extract from a database or ask IT to extract for you. Now you'll have views created for you from a database level where your Power BI report can go straight into and connect. This is the end of part 3, and I really hope that this has been informative and that you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much. It has been my pleasure.
Okay, so just from a perspective, I hope this added some value. And just before I open the floor to Gabriel, who will be facilitating any Q&A that might have come up, there's obviously a lot more questions after this. Just from our team's perspective, where we can really add value here is, as you just saw, that was real time. Shane created a dashboard in 15 minutes. We do offer training, which is from simple right to certification on Power BI, as well as SQL and other relational database and analytics tools. But the most important one for me is something we call dashboard in a day, where we can take a business user within 4 hours to be able to fully empower them to be able to do exactly what Shane did now, as well as a lot more. And then obviously the next couple of things we need to look at is how this also then can be implemented within operational systems, within applications. And like Shane was saying, once the data model has actually been created and given back to IT, you've now short-circuited what is usually the first 3 to 4 months of a data project and are already gaining insights for it. So Gabriel, back over to you.
Guys, thank you so much. That was truly insightful, and I think encouraging to see how much easier this has become for a layman or business user to be able to gain valuable insights from their own data. I mean, I've got my own practical example of my wife that works at a tiny school that brought home or showed me the data of the parents of kids in the school. And the point that she tried to make to the school was that if the kid gets a snotty nose, you can't just by default call mom anymore. And the reason for that being is, there's a large proportion of mothers that now work, as the world has changed. And a lot of them are in professional positions. There's a state prosecutor, for instance, on that list. So calling mom to come and fetch the kids is not by default necessarily the right thing anymore. But, she needed to visualize that, to explain that to the rest of, the school. And that's where my knowledge ended. It was pivot tables in Excel, and this truly makes it a lot easier. So before we go over to questions, and I'm going to encourage you guys to answer those, ask your questions in the chat window. I see a couple has come in so far, but before we do that, just one last poll, because this will help us, refine the next topic that we want to do in this multi-part webinar series. So you'll see that poll now pop up. The question there is, what is your biggest pain points with regards to data and analytics that you would like to find out more about? So that will pop up now. It's a multi-selection. So pick the ones that's important to you and please submit that. Great. Excellent. So while you guys are submitting the result of that poll, which I'll take a look at in a minute, let's just refer to the questions here. Terry asked a question, Shane, while you were publishing the work, the dashboard that you built, and she asked, can that published file be changed by other users after it's been shared?
Thanks, Gabriel. Yes, it can, and that's dependent on that user's permission. So if they have a contributor role within the Power BI workspace, they can download it, make changes, and redeploy it.
If I can also just jump in there, you can also just understand that what we had there was a single workspace. You can also set up Power BI with multiple workspaces and manage security either on a row level within the data itself or by access to the workspace or itself. So it is 100% secure. The one big thing is, which is nice, is when you create those Power BI dashboards, your super users of that report can actually use drill down functionality to actually gain more insight from that report than they would without having to create a new report. If you want to use it, you can reuse that report as a template and then create a new data model behind it if that user would like to.
Okay, great. Thanks, thanks, Shane and Greg. Terry, I hope that answers your question. Herman has also posted a question, but before I read that one out, I received one in a private chat, and maybe Greg, you and Shane can maybe jointly answer this. One of the issues I know that you mentioned, Greg, was cleaning up of data, and I'm sure it's a topic that you will discuss in more detail in a future webinar. But what is a tip or trick that you can give business users when they deal with data that's not 100% clean? For instance, a city name is being spelt differently. Is there any practical tips that a non-technical user can consider to try and overcome some of those hurdles that they might face?
I'll jump in there first. One of the simplest ways, actually, there's two ways to actually look at it. And we've actually used Power BI as a data exploration tool to find outliers as well as, if you want to call it, dirty data. So if you just put a file in and, as you say, you've got misspelt names or duplicated things, data or rows within that, if you just create a visualization of the actual table, it'll immediately start highlighting to you, because you'll be able to see, if you know the data, if you're getting multiple data points for Joburg, Johannesburg, JNB, whatever, that'll show you that there's a problem within that column within your table. You can then use Power Query to then either clean it up, or you can use DAX scripting as well to actually change. So, for example, let's change how from a capital, from a decimal to a whole number. You can do those transforms within Power Query. And also then that gives you the ability to actually going back to IT and saying, listen here, sorry, this data, it needs to be cleaned up, and we are finding these problems within the data. I hope that answers the question. Shane, have you got anything more to add to that?
No, 100%, Greg. That would be the easiest non-technical way to handle that, as illustrated in the demo.
That's a very valuable tip. Thanks for that. Just turning our attention into Herman's question. He said he's interested in natural language queries. He's asking if obviously that can be demoed in the future. But again, Greg, just from a layman's point of view, and Shane, what is some of the options that will be available to somebody that wants to get their hands dirty with that within Power BI?
Okay, so there are several ways to do that. Number one is you do it in the data ingestion phase, but that would we will do that in a separate webinar. But
Greg, maybe, sorry to interrupt you, maybe just for the sake of the audience, appreciating who's joined the call, what is natural language queries? What does it mean in practice for a business or a data owner?
Okay, so natural language processing is basically taking normal unstructured words and being able to pass those words, like, for example, a PDF file or a text or a web scraping, to be able to pick up specific things. So if you wanted to do a query searching for the word address within a document store, where you can actually got access to like just letters or documents, that would be like a natural language a query, where it's not querying a relational database. So as I was saying about this, I don't know if that makes sense to everyone, but if not, I mean, reach out to me and we can go through it with more detail. The nice thing about Power BI service is the fact that you can start now plugging in all the other Azure advanced analytics services to it. And you can, if you've got, for example, a Python or script that you've got that does natural language processing, we can actually show you how to plug it in, because you can plug your that query directly into Power BI, and it will run that Python script within the Power BI workspace. That is the easiest one if you're only using Power BI. Otherwise, there are other platforms, for example, Azure Synapse, which in my opinion is the most powerful analytics and warehousing tool out there. You can use Databricks, you can use data pipelines to be able to start doing your, if you want to call it, your unstructured media queries, whether that's CCTV, whether that is like image files, or just a normal, as I say, natural language queries, and then feed that into the data model separately. So there's two ways you can do it, either directly using Python within Power BI. Otherwise, you can use Azure Cognitive Services, which has that functionality, which you can then plug into Azure Analysis Services to create a common data model to deploy into Power BI. Sorry if I got a little bit too technical there, guys, but that is the way it would be done.
Okay, so yeah, the bottom line is if you understand Python and you have the black box formula that you need, you can plug that into Power BI, or you can rely on a cloud service to do that for you. Thanks, Greg. Here's a good one, Shane. Maybe you want to cover this one from Zandri. What is the difference between Power Query and Powerpivot?
Okay, thanks, Gabriel. Power Query, basically you get your data into Excel in worksheets or Excel data, and with Powerpivot you really enrich your data, your data model. You add value, and there's a lot more you can do with Powerpivot than Power Query.
Okay, so Power Query really focuses on the selection of the data, where Powerpivot enriches the data.
Correct.
Okay, great. Okay, excellent. And that covers all the questions that was asked in the Q&A window. So if anybody wants to use the last minute opportunity to post a question, please do so now. What I will also do in the chat window is to paste the contact details of First Digital, of Greg and Shane. So you guys feel free to reach out to them directly. I see no further questions coming in. So from my side, thank you very much for attending today's session. I hope it was insightful, and I do encourage everybody to reach out to us if you've got any further questions. Otherwise, we'll keep you posted about the recording and the follow-up webinars that will follow this foundational introduction to Power BI. So thank you very much and have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.